trading, the basis of Islamic finance. At the Islamic Bank, very soon Kabir grasps the fundamentals of the Islamic financial system. He is also introduced to the various financial options, which are broadly based on the principles of trading and the contract of sale. Islam puts emphasis on trading for acquisition of wealth. The Holy Quran says, Allah has allowed trading and prohibited riba. The law of contracts and the sale contract. What is a sale? A sale or bay'ah happens when two parties exchange a thing of value with either another thing of value or cash with mutual consent. A sale, aqd al-bay'ah, may be in the form of cash, credit, or a forward sale. Islamic banks purchase goods with cash payments and sell to their customers on credit. Islamic law of contracts. The contract law is laid down by the Holy Quran and the teachings of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. It is further elaborated by Islamic jurists. The two underlying rules of any contract would be prohibition of riba or interest and prohibition of gharar or absolute uncertainty. Binding and non-binding contracts. Sale or bay'ah and lease or ijara are binding contracts. Partnerships and agencies are non-binding contracts. Let's understand the nature of such contracts. Binding contracts. After a sale is executed, none of the parties involved can cancel or amend it unilaterally. This is irrespective of upward or downward movement in prices. If prices increase during the year, Rashid cannot ask for a higher price or cancel the sale. And if prices fall, Hamid cannot back out to avoid the loss. Similarly, an ijara or lease cannot be terminated before the agreed time without the mutual consent of both the parties. Since partnerships and agencies are non-binding contracts, any of the partners can exit from the partnership with prior notice to the other parties. Even non-binding contracts can be made binding with mutual consent. For example, the partners in a business can mutually agree that for continuity of the business, no partner will terminate the partnership within 2 years. Types of sale contracts in Islamic banks. Kabir learns about the different types of contracts he can enter into with an Islamic bank to fulfill Najma's wishes. He can get various assets with financing facilities from the bank. Mudarabah, or a cost-plus sale, is a contract where the seller declares the costs and adds a profit upon mutual agreement with the buyer. For example, a contract with the Islamic bank buys a car and sells it to Kabir with an agreed profit margin. Diminishing Musharakah, also known as partnership financing, is another common financing technique used by Islamic banks. For example, a contract where the Islamic bank purchases a house in partnership with Kabir. Ijara is a hire or lease contract where a physical asset or services or expertise are hired against payment. For example, in Ijara, the bank purchases a car and leases it to Kabir. The bank will be charging rent, and may also cover its cost. At the end of the lease, Kabir may purchase the car from the bank at its fair value. Tawarruk is a means of generating cash by way of trading, which combines two separate sale and purchase transactions. For example, Islamic Bank sells an item to Kabir on deferred payment basis and then sells the same on behalf of Kabir to any third party to generate liquidity for him. Salam is a trade-based forward financing technique in which the commodity purchased becomes a debt owed by the seller. For example, a contract where Kabir sells ready-made garments to the Islamic Bank at a future delivery date against spot payment of price. Istisna is a kind of forward sale where a commodity is transacted before it comes into existence. For example, a contract of works in which the bank enters to construct a house for Kabir. Prohibition of Riba. Prohibition of Riba is the first Sharia principle that Azim would check for compliance, for it is this norm that is central to Islamic financial ethics and law. In the literal sense of the word, riba means an increase. In the context of a loan or a debt, riba is perceived to be the interest paid on the loan or debt. According to Sharia, not only the taking but also the giving of riba or interest is prohibited. Borrowing money on interest for buying goods, taking interest-bearing loans for education, paying interest on a credit card are all haram. Anyone who associates himself with such acts is also committing the sin of riba. Why does Islam prohibit riba? Islam stands for socio-economic justice and welfare of the society. In an interest-based economy, the poor borrow money from the rich, making the rich richer. This leads to exploitation of the poor, gross inequalities of income, and concentration of money in the hands of a few. At a macro level, interest contributes to creation of money out of thin air and inflation. Rising interest rates increase the cost of production, which in turn increase the price of goods. This leads to inflation in the economy, thereby increasing the suffering of the poor. In short, a domino effect. Prohibition of interest prevents Islamic banks from getting any returns or profit. However, Islamic financial institutions need to make profit for their survival. So instead of lending money, the Islamic bank purchases goods and sells or leases them to people to make a profit or get a return on its investment. In an Islamic financial system, both the investor or the fund supplier and the fund user will bear the risk depending on who is the owner of the goods. In an Islamic sale contract, the bank will bear the risk as long as the goods are in its ownership. In an Islamic lease contract, all ownership-related risks and expenses will be borne by the bank. While in an interest-based system, the entire business risk is borne by the borrower. Prohibition of Gharar. Gharar means absolute risk, uncertainty, or contractual ambiguity. Do any of my transactions involve Gharar? I would avoid it. Hamid is also concerned about whether his financial transactions involve Gharar. Sale contracts that are considered void due to Gharar include the following: sale of an item over which the seller has no control, a sale contract that lacks clarity in the subject matter, a contract that lacks clarity in the rights and liabilities of the parties. Example: selling an escaped animal, selling stolen property, selling a bird in the sky or fish in the water. A contract in which the price is not finalized. All parties to the contract must be informed enough to make reasonable estimates of the outcomes. The Quran clearly opposes transactions causing injustice in any form to any of the parties. Renowned Sharia scholar Professor Mustafa Al-Zarqa defines gharar as a sale of probable items whose existence or characteristics are uncertain due to its risky nature, which makes the trade similar to gambling. Thus, any sale contract where it is uncertain that the subject matter of the sale will be delivered, regardless of whether it exists at the time of the contract, is said to contain an element of gharar and is therefore void. Gharar also refers to excessive complexity in contracts. In principle, Sharia does not sanction mutually dependent contracts. Ijara Muntahiya Bitamlik is a composite product containing multiple contracts. These contracts must be totally independent of each other, else they will end up containing elements of gharar. Gharar is different from the commercial risk that is a basic requirement for permissibility of return on an investment. While the prohibition of riba is absolute, some degree of gharar or uncertainty is acceptable in the Islamic framework. This is particularly so with non-commercial contracts like gift, loan, bequest, endowment, guarantee, and assignment of debt. The main feature of non-commercial contracts is the donation of a property or its use. As donations do not generate rights for any party, uncertainty does not make such contracts haram. Let's recap what we have learnt in this module. The major norms of Islamic finance are prohibition of riba, prohibition of gharar, prohibition of al-qimar and al-maisir, sharing of risk and reward in business, prohibition of non-Sharia compliant contracts. Islamic financial products and operations are based on these norms. Takaful, an alternative to the conventional insurance system in Islamic finance, is based on the concept of ta'awun, meaning mutual help. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to the e-learning program on Musharakah. In this module, you will learn about the concept of Musharakah, the steps undertaken in a Musharakah arrangement, the financial calculations and profit sharing in a Musharakah transaction, the three types of Musharakah with examples, diminishing Musharakah used in house purchase, the basic differences between a Mudarabah and a Musharakah, the steps undertaken in a Musharakah. In Musharakah, two or more persons provide finance for a project. All partners have a right to work for the joint business. However, this is not a necessary condition. Any of the partners can be a sleeping partner, authorizing the others to manage the business. All partners are entitled to share the profit in a pre-agreed ratio. The losses, if any, are to be shared exactly in the proportion of capital invested by each partner. Musharakah is useful in financing of manufacturing, trading, or any business venture where the bank is willing to act as a partner. The basic differences between a Mudarabah and a Musharakah.
What are the differences between Mudarabah and Musharakah?
the differences between Mudarabah and Musharakah. In Mudarabah, the capital is put in wholly by one party, whereas in Musharakah, all the partners are investors. In Mudarabah, the capital investor cannot take part in the day-to-day management of the business, but in Musharakah, all the partners have the right to take part in running the business. In Mudarabah, the losses are borne entirely by the capital contributor, but in Musharakah, losses are borne by all the partners. In Mudarabah, liability is limited to the capital invested, and in Musharakah, liabilities are usually unlimited. In Mudarabah, in some cases, Mudarabah assets may belong only to the financier. Only the income might be shared. But in a Musharakah transaction, all assets are joint property of the partners on pro rata basis.
I think the Musharakah contract will be perfect for our requirements. We will discuss this further and get back to you in a day or two. Thanks for the valuable information.
You're welcome. The steps undertaken in a Musharakah. In Musharakah, two or more persons provide finance for a project. All partners have a right to work for the joint business. However, this is not a necessary condition. Any of the partners can be a sleeping partner, authorizing the others to manage the business. All partners are entitled to share the profit in a pre-agreed ratio. The losses, if any, are to be shared exactly in the proportion of capital invested by each partner. Musharakah is useful in financing of manufacturing, trading, or any business venture where the bank is willing to act as a partner. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to the e-learning program on Musharakah. In this module, you will learn about the concept of Musharakah, the steps undertaken in a Musharakah arrangement, the financial calculations and profit sharing in a Musharakah transaction, the three types of Musharakah with examples, diminishing Musharakah used in house purchase, the basic differences between a Mudarabah and a Musharakah, Islamic covered cards. Using the Tawarruk mechanism, let us suppose that the Islamic bank, acting as your agent, is able to sell copper for 10,000 dirhams. Under the Wadi'a principle, the bank is a safekeeper of the funds. Now, instead of crediting your operating account with the sale proceeds, the bank creates a guaranteed current deposit account for you for 10,000 dirhams. This will be your covered card limit. You can use the card for retail purchases and cash withdrawals just like a conventional credit card. Your transactions will be backed by the cash held in your Wadi'a account. This mechanism is entirely in compliance with Sharia. The card should not be used for items disqualified by Sharia. However, experts are not in favor of open use of Tawarruk. They allow its use only for corporates. Renowned scholar Dr. Ubaidullah of Islamic Development Bank Jeddah says about Tawarruk, this is considered hiyal, or a legal ruse, since the individual concerned has no real intention of buying or selling the commodity. He engages in the purchase and sale transactions for realization of cash. Tawarruk addresses a genuine need of the people, the need for cash. And I hope I have cleared the air on the subject. Yes, of course, thank you very much. Tawarruk is an Islamic financing method used to provide customers with liquidity. Tawarruk is a means of generating cash by way of trading. The commodity is being traded only for the purpose of raising funds and not as an end in itself. It combines two separate sale and purchase transactions. There are three important rules to be followed to ensure that the tawarruk transaction is valid. Rule number 1. The commodity must be sold to a different person and not to the seller himself. Otherwise, it will be a case of sale and repurchase. There must not be a prior arrangement between the parties to a tawarruk transaction. Rule number 3. There must be a time period between each purchase and the subsequent sale. Tawarruk is also the basis for the issue of Islamic covered cards. Some scholars have reservations against tawarruk based on the fact that tawarruk creates new debts far larger than the cash received. You may now reinforce your learning by going through this topic in the illustrated textbook and check your comprehension of the subject by attempting the questions in the workbook. Our next module will introduce you to the concept of Musharakah.